The boxes were unpacked. The internet was working. And for once, his coffee machine hadn't betrayed him on the first morning. Life was finally quiet. Too quiet, maybe. His new neighborhood looked like a still frame from a real estate commercial. Manicured lawns, pastel-colored homes with perfect symmetry, and driveways that gleamed like showroom floors. It was the kind of place where nothing seemed out of place. And that's exactly what made it unsettling. As Jake stepped outside with his steaming mug, the early sunlight danced across the hood of his 2007 black Mustang. A little worn, a little loud, but unmistakably his. It purred proudly in his driveway like a beast that had finally found its den. He leaned on the porch railing, sipping slowly, breathing in the sweet scent of jasmine wafting from a neighbor's hedge. It all felt peaceful, until he felt it. That prickly sensation, like someone watching from behind the curtains. He glanced across the street. A window curtain fluttered unnaturally fast, like someone had just stepped back in a hurry. A beat later, the curtain twitched again. This time, a face, just a flash, framed in stark red lipstick and oversized sunglasses despite the early hour. A clipboard was visible. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Well, okay then," he muttered, walking back inside. That was his first encounter with the eyes of the neighborhood. Later that day, while adjusting picture frames and unpacking a stubborn kitchen box, a knock rattled his front door. Not a gentle tap. A series of sharp, deliberate strikes like a summons. Jake opened it to find a woman standing with perfect posture, her silver bob tucked neatly beneath a sun hat the size of a satellite dish. "Good afternoon," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Karen. I'm with the HOA." Jake blinked. "Hi. I'm Jake. Just moved in." She didn't shake his hand. Instead, she raised the clipboard like she was about to read off a warrant. "I've already noticed a few things. First, your vehicle." Jake stepped onto the porch, eyes trailing down the driveway. "The Mustang." "Yes." Karen tilted her head, peering at him through her reflective sunglasses. "It's not registered with the Homeowners Association. Vehicles parked in driveways must be approved and listed in the community's vehicle database." Jake frowned. "I just got here yesterday." "There's no grace period," she snapped with all the warmth of a security camera. "If a vehicle isn't listed, it's subject to removal." Page 12, paragraph 3 of the HOA guidelines. Jake exhaled slowly, trying to keep his tone friendly. "Look, I'm still getting settled. I'll have everything updated by Monday." Karen tapped the clipboard again. "It would be in your best interest to follow the rules, Mr. Dawson. We like to maintain order here." With that, she turned and strode off. Not another word. Her sandals made clicking sounds on the pavement, each step oddly threatening in its rhythm. Jake stood there for a moment, processing. He looked at his Mustang, then at the street, then up at the windows, where curtains again shifted like ghosts slipping away. "Order," he muttered. "Sure." He had no idea he had just stepped into the arena. And Karen. She was already planning her next move. The next few hours dragged by in a haze of packing and organizing. Jake couldn't shake the image of Karen and her clipboard. It wasn't just the way she'd spoken, with that cold, almost rehearsed tone. It was the look in her eyes, something in them that felt like she had already won, like she was simply marking time until the next step in her plan. He shook it off. After all, he was just getting settled. The HOA couldn't be that strict, right? But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the neighborhood in a soft amber glow, Jake felt the eerie stillness again. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath. He stepped outside, planning to check the yard, when he noticed something out of place. His Mustang, parked innocently on the driveway, gleamed under the fading light. But this time, he wasn't alone. Karen stood by her front door, peering out through the half-open blinds. Jake paused, a chill crawling down his spine. She was watching him, watching his car. "It's just a coincidence," he told himself. Maybe she's still mad about the parking thing. But when he turned around to head inside, he saw her again, clipboard in hand, approaching his driveway. It was 8:15 p.m. He opened the door just as she reached the edge of his property. "Mr. Dawson," she called, voice sharp as glass. "I'm afraid your time's up. The HOA board has made its decision." She didn't even bother with pleasantries anymore. "Your car isn't on the list, and it will be towed immediately." Jake stood frozen, mouth dry. "Wait, what? I thought we agreed I had until Monday. I'm not even officially registered yet." Karen's lips curled into a thin smile. "Rules are rules, Mr. Dawson. And rules don't wait. Not in my neighborhood." Her words were sharp, precise, like a judge pronouncing a sentence. Jake's heart raced. He could feel the adrenaline rising. His car wasn't a nuisance, wasn't hurting anyone. "You can't just tow my car. That's ridiculous." His voice was louder now, but there was no heat behind it, just disbelief. Karen's eyes glittered. "I've already called the towing company. They'll be here any minute." Before Jake could respond, a rumble in the distance cut through the air. Tires crunching on gravel, the unmistakable growl of an engine. An ominous hum. His stomach dropped. The tow truck. Visual. The street lights flickering on one by one as the tow truck's headlights pierced the growing darkness. The sound of its engine loud and deliberate. Karen watches, her eyes cold as she steps back onto the sidewalk, clearly savoring the moment. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, the sensation of helplessness crashing over him like a wave. He turned to look at his Mustang, his car, his dream project, being taken away for a technicality. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. "Stop," Jake shouted, racing out toward the truck. "This isn't fair." The driver, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his arms, gave him a glance but didn't stop. The tow truck's hook clicked, locking around the Mustang's rear axle. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears. Without thinking, he reached for his phone, his hands shaking. 911. His finger hovered over the button. "This is theft," he muttered under his breath. "It's my property." A loud honk echoed from the tow truck as the driver climbed into the cab, cranking the engine. The Mustang started to lift off the ground. Visual. The car tilts awkwardly, like a wounded animal being dragged against its will, its tires scraping against the driveway as the tow truck begins pulling it forward. "No, you can't do this." Jake charged toward the truck, but it was already too late. Karen, standing behind him with her arms crossed, was watching with an almost gleeful expression. But then, something unexpected happened. As Jake fumbled with his phone, dialing 911, Karen's eyes flicked over his shoulder. She froze, the smug look fading from her face. A siren. In the distance. Louder. Closer. Visual. The red and blue lights of a police car flashing against the street's calm facade, turning the quiet night into something electric. The lights of the squad car pierced through the darkness, followed by another. The police had arrived. For a moment, everything stopped. The tow truck's engine idled, the hum of the world around them suddenly muted, as if even the universe was holding its breath. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jake, heart pounding, finally exhaled. It wasn't over yet. Jake stood frozen for a heartbeat. The tow truck had already lifted his car, its back wheels slowly lifting off the ground with an agonizing squeal. The weight of the moment crashed over him like a tidal wave. But then, something else. The faint whine of sirens, as if the universe itself had decided this was the moment. This was where things would change. The red and blue lights sliced through the night air, painting the quiet street in eerie, vibrant hues. They illuminated the Mustang's body, casting long shadows across the pavement. The tow truck driver looked up, his face turning pale. He shifted uneasily in the cab, his hand already hovering over the gearshift, ready to pull away. But Karen wasn't fazed. She stood, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at the corners of her lips, It was as if she knew the game was already over. She called the shots, and now the cavalry had arrived, unaware that she was about to lose everything. Not so fast. A deep voice broke through the tension as two squad cars came to a halt just behind the truck, tires crunching against the gravel. The officers stepped out with precision, the flashing lights casting harsh shadows on their uniforms. The first officer, a tall man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached Karen first. "Ma'am, you called this in." Karen straightened, her posture rigid, eyes flicking between the officers and Jake. "Yes, officer," she said, with just the hint of smugness left in her voice. "This vehicle is not on our approved list of registered cars for the HOA. I've already informed him, but he refuses to comply. He's violating HOA rules, and I've called for a tow." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You've called a tow without any official notice. Is this a private property violation or a matter for the HOA's legal department?" Karen's eyes flared with momentary panic, but she quickly regained her composure. "This is part of the HOA's regulations. The car must be moved immediately." Jake stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Actually, I've already told her I'm in the process of registering my car. She didn't give me a chance, and now she's calling in a tow without proper warning. I'm still in the process of settling in." He turned to the officers, showing them the papers from the previous day. "My move-in documents, registration paperwork. I haven't had a chance to finish the process." The second officer, a shorter woman with short-cropped hair and a calm demeanor, scanned the papers briefly. "It looks like he's got a point, Karen." Her voice was cool, calculated. The wind seemed to pick up, sending a shiver down Jake's spine as he stood there. He could feel his heart thudding in his chest, but he stood his ground. Karen's smugness was starting to unravel, bit by bit, but she wasn't done yet. "No, this is my neighborhood." Karen's voice rose slightly, cutting through the night air. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous now, like a trapped animal ready to fight. "I'm trying to keep order here. If I have to, I'll take this to court. You're wasting valuable resources." The officers exchanged a glance, but didn't say a word. They could see it now, the subtle undercurrent of her power play, her belief that she was above the law. And that's when the first officer spoke again, his tone sharper than before. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand how this works. You can't just call for a tow like this unless the situation meets certain legal requirements. This isn't a criminal matter. It's a civil dispute, and it looks like you've overstepped." He looked back at the tow truck driver, who was clearly on edge now. "You're about to tow a car from private property without a legal basis for it." Jake felt a sudden surge of relief, like the pressure in his chest was finally lifting. He hadn't imagined the power of his own position until now. The officers had arrived, and they weren't playing along with Karen's little game. But Karen's eyes darkened, her composure faltering for the first time. She tried to shake it off, but the damage was already done. The first officer turned back to the tow truck driver. "Lower the car," he commanded. "You're not towing this vehicle unless you have official documentation. And right now, you don't." The driver hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously between the officers and Karen. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he started to lower the Mustang back to the ground. Visual. The car's wheels scraping loudly as it touches the pavement once again, the tow truck's massive hook releasing its hold on the undercarriage, like a predator releasing its prey. The air felt heavier now, more tense than before. The Mustang was safe, for the moment, but Jake knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The officers were already moving. Jake couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips. "Ma'am," the second officer said, her voice calm but firm, "you need to step back. You've made a mistake, and now it's time to let this go." The Mustang was back on the ground, tires scraping as the tow truck driver reluctantly finished lowering it, his hand still twitching near the controls. Jake stood there, the bitter taste of triumph on his tongue. But he knew this was just the beginning. The officers had arrived, yes, but Karen was still standing there, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin, stubborn line. Her eyes were cold now, her posture rigid like a soldier on the battlefield, ready to call reinforcements. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The officers, however, were beginning to move toward the cars, their words still crisp with authority. The first officer glanced back over his shoulder, offering Jake a reassuring nod. "You're in the clear for now, but I suggest you follow through with the registration process, sir. HOA or not, this situation is over for tonight." Jake nodded, exhaling in relief, his pulse still hammering. He couldn't believe what had just happened. It was a victory, but for how long? Karen's face twitched as she finally spoke. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "You've made a mistake, officer. You'll regret this. I'll call the HOA board. I'll have you investigated. I have connections." The officers shared a glance, unimpressed. The second officer raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything, simply watching as Karen marched toward her front door, her heels clicking with each step. The tension still lingered, thick in the air, like a storm waiting to break. But Jake wasn't about to let her get away with it, not after what she tried to pull. His fingers instinctively found his phone in his pocket, and he dialed the number that had been in his head since Karen first stepped onto his porch. His heart still raced from the adrenaline, but the seconds on the phone seemed to stretch out like hours. He needed to take action, and he wasn't going to wait for Karen to drag him into some endless HOA mess. The line rang twice, then a calm, professional voice answered. "Good evening, this is the HOA legal department. How can I assist you?" Jake didn't waste any time. "My name is Jake Dawson. I'm a new homeowner at 1436 Birchwood Lane. I need to report a gross misuse of HOA power by one of your so-called representatives." There was a brief pause. "Go ahead, Mr. Dawson." "Karen O'Connor, your self-appointed HOA enforcer, called a tow truck on my vehicle without any legal basis. The truck was already lifting my car before I was even able to provide proof that my registration was in process. And on top of that, she trespassed on my property to take photos of my car. I need this investigated immediately." The person on the other end seemed to hesitate. "Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry to hear about this situation. I'll need to file this complaint, but may I ask how you were able to stop the towing?" A smirk tugged at Jake's lips. "Let's just say the police showed up at the right time. They made it clear that she didn't have the legal right to tow my vehicle." Karen didn't appreciate that very much. Another pause. Jake could practically hear the wheels turning on the other end. "I see. This is quite serious. I'll need to get back to you within the next 24 hours. But Mr. Dawson, if what you're saying is true, we will be looking into this matter with urgency." Jake hung up without saying another word. His heart was still racing, his breath coming in sharp bursts, but there was something else now, a sense of power. He'd taken a step forward, and Karen's smug little world was about to come crashing down. But it wasn't over. Just as he turned to look at the street again, his phone buzzed in his hand. An incoming text. "Unknown number. You think this is over, Dawson. You have no idea what you've just unleashed. Wait until the HOA gets involved. You'll wish you'd never moved here." Jake stared at the screen, his fingers tightening around his phone. He recognized the number, one of Karen's silent allies in the HOA. But this wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. And Jake, well, he wasn't backing down now. Not when he was so close to winning. Visual. The camera pulls back, capturing Jake's silhouette standing in his driveway, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows. His fingers flex around his phone as the blue and red lights of the squad cars flicker in the distance, and the quiet hum of the night begins to settle, as though the calm before the storm is about to break. It was clear now. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. Jake wasn't just some guy in a new neighborhood. He wasn't going to let her turn his life into some petty HOA battle. And if she thought she could scare him off, she had another thing coming. The night had settled into an uneasy calm, but Jake knew it was only temporary. He stood there, foam still clenched in his hand, staring at the message that Karen's ally had sent. The words felt like a warning shot, echoing in his mind like a distant rumble of thunder. "You'll wish you'd never moved here." It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise of war, a fight he hadn't been prepared for. He'd thought things would be simple when he moved into the quiet, suburban neighborhood. But now, everything felt different. His Mustang was safe, for now, but Karen wasn't going to let this go. And the HOA. They were about to play their hand too. He glanced at his phone once more before slipping it into his pocket. The night air felt thick, pressing against his chest as he exhaled. He could still hear the faint hum of the squad cars parked down the street, their lights now dimming, but the feeling of dread lingered. The next morning, Jake woke to an unusual stillness. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that hinted at something looming on the horizon. He didn't want to go outside. Not yet. But when he drew back the curtains, the world outside his window looked exactly the same. The immaculately trimmed lawns, the perfectly aligned houses, the pristine sidewalks that seemed to mock his very existence now. A cold knot twisted in his stomach as he noticed something new. At the end of his driveway, right next to the mailbox, was an envelope. It was addressed to him, but there was no name. No return address. Just the faint, crisp imprint of a letter. Something formal, something official. His instincts screamed at him not to touch it, but curiosity won out. He stepped outside, the early morning chill brushing against his skin, and bent to pick up the envelope. He ripped it open, unfolding the single page inside. His fingers froze as he read the first line. Notice of immediate violation. Failure to comply with HOA regulations. Warning. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He read the entire letter, his eyes scanning the harshly worded sentences. Karen had already gone to the HOA. And now the fight he had feared was beginning to take shape. The letter outlined a series of infractions, none of which were true. His Mustang was parked in a spot deemed non-compliant, and the landscaping in his front yard was listed as untidy, though it had only been a few days since he moved in. The list of alleged violations seemed endless, but what struck him most was the final paragraph. Failure to address these issues within 24 hours will result in a fine and further action, including potential legal proceedings. This notice is final. Jake's fists clenched, the paper crumpling in his grip. This was Karen's doing. She was using the HOA to go after him, throwing up a wall of bureaucracy and paperwork to wear him down. He wasn't going to let it work. Not now. The quiet hum of his phone vibrating in his pocket startled him. It was a text from his lawyer, his friend, Nick, the one he'd called after getting the first message from the HOA. Nick, just got your complaint. I need you to stay calm. The HOA has some power, but they can't just make up rules. I'm on it, but you'll need to be patient. Jake's stomach churned. Patience. After what he'd just read, patience felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. But he couldn't show weakness. Not to Karen, not to the HOA, not to anyone. His eyes flicked back to the envelope. A cold sweat prickled his skin as he stepped back toward the house, but not before his gaze caught a flash of movement. Across the street, a figure stood in front of the O'Connor's house, the house where Karen lived. It was her, standing there, clipboard in hand, just staring at him. Her eyes were locked on his, her posture stiff as ever. She wasn't just watching. She was waiting for him to make a move. The breeze stirred the trees, and for a brief moment, Jake thought he could hear her voice. Quiet, calculated. You'll regret this. The silence that followed was suffocating. Visual. The neighborhood, so still, so serene, suddenly feels oppressive. The sunlight dapples through the trees, casting long shadows that stretch unnaturally across the street. Jake, holding the letter in one hand, stares back at Karen with an unwavering resolve, the tension palpable between them. Jake turned on his heel, heading back inside. This wasn't just about his car anymore. This was a fight for everything he'd worked for. His home, his peace of mind. Karen had underestimated him. And now, the real game was about to begin. Jake couldn't shake the image of Karen's cold, calculating stare from his mind. It was like she was waiting for him to make the first mistake, watching him from across the street, her posture like that of a general before the final battle. But Jake wasn't about to back down. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Still, as he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the letter with the HOA violations, a sense of dread crept up his spine. His lawyer, Nick, had reassured him. Kind of. But Jake knew he had no time to waste. Every second felt like a countdown to something worse. He could already picture Karen, clipboard in hand, making her rounds, collecting more evidence to use against him. The phone buzzed again. A text from Nick. Nick, I've got the HOA's legal team on this. We'll fight this, but it'll take some time. Keep your head down, Jake. Don't provoke them any more than you already have. Jake's fingers hovered over the screen as he read Nick's message. Time. It always came down to time, didn't it? Every move Karen made felt like it was just part of a larger plan to wear him down, one bureaucratic nightmare at a time. But Jake wasn't backing down, not when he was this close to victory. As he stood up to grab a glass of water, his gaze drifted back to the street outside. The O'Connor's house loomed in the distance, and for a moment, he thought he saw Karen's silhouette again in the window. Watching. Waiting. Visual. The sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the street. The air felt thick, as if every breath Jake took carried the weight of the tension between him and Karen. Her house, the centerpiece of the neighborhood, seemed to draw in all the light, leaving his own home in the shadow. A loud knock on his door interrupted his thoughts, jolting him out of his trance. His heart skipped a beat. Who could that be at this hour? He opened the door cautiously, his mind still reeling from the events of the morning. There, standing on his doorstep, was Officer Lopes, the same officer who had helped him the night before. "Mr. Dawson, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but serious. Jake's stomach dropped. He knew what was coming. He wasn't naive enough to think the HOA would back off just because of a few police visits. They didn't play fair, and Karen's influence had already made it clear she had friends in high places. "What's this about?" Jake asked, his voice tight. "I just got a call from the HOA." Officer Lopes replied, her gaze flicking down the street, to the O'Connor's house. "They've escalated this matter. There's going to be an official inspection tomorrow, whether you like it or not." Jake's pulse quickened. He couldn't believe it. The HOA wasn't just getting legal, they were getting personal. The message was clear. They were going to dig into every part of his property, scrutinize every corner, every tiny infraction. "What exactly are they looking for?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. Lopes glanced back at her car, as if contemplating how much to say. "They're claiming your property isn't in compliance. Landscaping, driveway space, car parking, it's all going to be checked. But listen to me, Jake. This is more than just about rules. This is about power. Karen's got influence, and she won't stop until you give in." Jake clenched his fists, but his voice remained steady. "What's the next step?" "You need to prepare. They'll show up tomorrow morning with inspectors, with more people backing Karen's claims. They'll try to rattle you, get you off balance. But you have rights," Lopes said, her tone softening. "I'll be here too, if anything goes south. Just make sure you're ready for whatever they throw at you." Jake nodded slowly, his mind racing. He could feel the storm building in his chest. He had a choice to make. Give in, or fight back with everything he had. He stood up straight, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like armor. This wasn't just about his car anymore. This wasn't even just about his house. This was about his life, his freedom. And Karen had just made a huge mistake. Visual. The last rays of daylight bathed the neighborhood in a fiery orange glow, casting long shadows across Jake's face as he stands in the doorway, his expression hardening into determination. The storm clouds gathering overhead seemed to echo the tension in his heart. The battle was no longer a simple dispute, it was a war, and it was about to get ugly. "Thanks for the heads up, Lopes," Jake said, his voice unwavering. "I'm ready." As the officer walked away, Jake closed the door, his eyes locked on the O'Connors' house once more. He could feel Karen's presence, even from a distance. This was the calm before the storm. And Jake was ready to fight. The morning of the inspection arrived faster than Jake had anticipated. The sun had barely risen, but already the air was thick with tension. Jake stood in his living room, his eyes locked on the street outside. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, a calm before the storm. It felt like everything had been leading to this moment. The HOA, Karen's manipulations, and now the official inspection. He wasn't sure if he was prepared for what was coming, but he knew this fight had gone beyond anything he could have imagined. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Nick. "Nick, the inspectors should be arriving soon. Keep your head cool and don't let them rattle you. You've got the law on your side, but they'll try to bully you. Stay firm." Jake exhaled, tension still knotting his chest. He had to keep his composure. This wasn't just about a few petty rules. This was a test of willpower. Karen had made it clear that she wasn't going to stop until he was broken, but Jake wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Not this time. He stepped outside, the cool morning air sharp against his skin. The inspectors were already on their way up the street. Jake could see them. Two men in formal clothing, clipboards in hand. Behind them, Karen stood, arms crossed, her posture rigid with an air of self-assurance. She was watching him, waiting for him to react. Her gaze was filled with an unspoken challenge. The inspectors made their way to his driveway, stopping at the edge of his yard. One of them, a tall man with graying hair, looked at Jake with a practiced, professional expression. "Mr. Dawson," he said, his tone polite but firm, "we're here to conduct the inspection as per the HOA's request. We'll need to evaluate your property for any potential violations." Jake met the man's gaze, his jaw clenched but his voice steady. "Of course. But before we proceed, I want to make it clear that I've already contacted my lawyer and local law enforcement. Any actions taken today will be monitored closely." The inspector paused, glancing over at Karen. She gave a slight nod, as if to signal that everything was going according to plan. Jake didn't care about Karen's approval. This was his home, and he wasn't going to let her or anyone else take it from him. As the inspectors began their work, walking around the yard and taking notes, Jake stayed where he stood, watching them carefully. They measured the grass, checked the parking spots, and noted the smallest details, clearly looking for any excuse to justify their findings. It wasn't just a property inspection, it was an act of intimidation. They were trying to break him, to make him feel small and powerless. Karen stayed on the sidelines, her eyes never leaving him. She looked like she was savoring every moment, convinced that her victory was inevitable, but Jake wasn't going to let her win. He had the law on his side, and he wasn't afraid to use it. After what felt like hours, the inspection finally came to a close. The inspector with the graying hair turned to face Jake, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Dawson, we've completed the inspection. We found several violations of HOA regulations, which will result in a fine. You've been given multiple warnings, and now the HOA is requesting that you address these issues within the next 48 hours or face further action." Jake felt a surge of frustration, but he held his ground. "I've already disputed these violations. This entire inspection is part of a personal vendetta. I'm not going to just accept this." The inspector's face remained neutral, but Jake could see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Karen stepped forward, her smile smug. It's too late for that, Mr. Dawson. The HOA has already made their decision. Jake's voice was cold, but resolute. Actually, Karen, it's not too late. You've been using the HOA to try and force me out, but it won't work. I'm appealing these so-called violations, and I'm taking legal action to ensure they're not enforced. Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, the smugness slipped from her face. She hadn't expected him to fight back. You can't do that, she snapped. The HOA has already decided. Jake didn't flinch. The HOA has no authority to make up rules as they go. I've already spoken to my lawyer, and if you want to escalate this further, we'll be seeing each other in court. The inspectors exchanged uncertain glances, clearly taken aback by Jake's resolve. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but the taller inspector held up a hand, silencing her. Mr. Dawson, we can't simply ignore the HOA's ruling, but we will respect your right to appeal. If you decide to take legal action, that's your prerogative. Jake stood tall, his heart pounding, but his resolve unshaken. Then I'll see you in court. Karen's expression darkened, her frustration evident. Jake could feel her seething beneath the surface, but he wasn't about to back down. This wasn't just about a car or a lawn. It was about his dignity, his rights, and his home. As the inspectors left, Karen remained behind, staring at Jake with burning intensity. You've made a big mistake, she said, her voice low and venomous. You won't win. Jake didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back into his house, the weight of the battle still pressing on him, but a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. The first move had been his, and the fight was far from over. Jake could feel the weight of the final decision pressing down on him as he sat in his living room, the lawyer's letter in his hand. The HOA had thrown everything they had at him. And now, it was down to this. The court case was set. The final battle would unfold in front of a judge, but Jake knew that Karen wasn't going to let it go that easily. She had always played dirty, and he had no illusions that this was over just because the inspectors had left. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to grow louder as the day wore on. It was only a matter of time before Karen would come for him again, this time with a vengeance. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He had stood his ground. He had fought for what was his. Now he was ready for whatever came next. The phone buzzed. It was Nick, his lawyer. Nick, I just got word from the courthouse. The judge has set a hearing for next week. You'll have a chance to present your case, but Karen won't back down easily. She's got powerful allies, but you've got the truth on your side. Don't let her shake you. Jake read the message, feeling the surge of determination. He wasn't going to let Karen's influence ruin his life any longer. She thought she could manipulate the HOA to get what she wanted, but she didn't know who she was up against. The sound of footsteps outside snapped him from his thoughts. He turned to the window, his heart skipping a beat. There, standing across the street, was Karen. She was watching him, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her expression cold and calculating. Jake's pulse quickened. This was it, the final showdown. The doorbell rang. Jake took a deep breath before walking to the door. He swung it open, and there she was, Karen. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two of the HOA's most loyal members stood behind her, their faces stern and unsympathetic. Mr. Dawson, Karen began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I've come to give you one last chance to make things right. You can drop this case, pay the fine, and move on with your life. The HOA is willing to be reasonable. Jake didn't flinch. You've been unreasonable from the start, Karen. You've used the HOA as a weapon, trying to destroy my life. I'm not backing down now. Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. You don't understand, do you? This isn't just about rules or violations. This is about power, and you've lost. The HOA has made its decision, and there's no turning back. Jake's grip tightened on the doorframe. I'll take my chances in court, The HOA doesn't get to dictate my life." Karen's eyes flashed with rage, but she masked it quickly. "You're making a huge mistake, Jake. You'll regret this." Before she could say another word, the sound of a car engine approaching interrupted the tension. It was Officer Lopes, driving up the street, her patrol car coming to a stop in front of Jake's house. She stepped out, her eyes scanning the scene as she approached. Karen's posture stiffened, and her two allies exchanged nervous glances. "Everything okay here?" Officer Lopes asked, her voice calm but firm. She had become more than just a casual ally in the past few days. She was now a key figure in this fight. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Jake interrupted her. "Yes, Officer Lopes. We're just having a little chat about the HOA's latest attempts to force me into submission. Karen here wants me to drop the case and pay up." Lopes raised an eyebrow, looking at Karen and her associates. "Is that so? Well, I'll remind you that Jake has every right to fight this. You can't intimidate him with threats or underhanded tactics. If you continue to harass him, I'll have no choice but to escalate this further." Karen's face twisted in anger, but she held her tongue. She knew better than to argue with a police officer in front of a crowd, but Jake could see the fury in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she'd made her first move against him, the look of someone who didn't like being challenged. "We'll see you in court," Karen spat, turning on her heel and walking away. Her allies followed closely behind her, and within moments, they were gone. Jake stood there, his heart pounding, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. He had stood his ground. He had faced Karen head-on, and he had come out victorious. This wasn't just a win in the court of law. It was a personal victory, a statement that he wouldn't be bullied, that he would fight for his rights, no matter what. Officer Lopes gave him a small smile. "You did good, Jake. I'll be there for you every step of the way in court. This is far from over, but I think you've shown Karen you're not someone to mess with." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time, he felt like he was finally on the winning side. The battle had been long and hard, but now, with the law on his side and the support of his allies, he was ready for whatever came next. As Karen's car disappeared down the street, Jake couldn't help but smile. This time, it wasn't just about a tow truck or a lawn violation. It was about standing up for what was right. And no one, especially not Karen, could take that away from him.